The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey, welcome. It's Friday, March 8th, 2019. Welcome to this collaborative game webinar with our longtime friend and alum, Jeff Glueck, who is the president and CEO at Foursquare today, and I'll be introducing him in just a moment. I just wanted to thank all of you for joining us live and also listening later via recording. We're looking forward to seeing many of you April 15th through the 17th in San Francisco for the next council meetings. And we have more great webinars coming up, including with Karen Garacki, who is the president and CEO of Borsheims, one of the Warren Buffett companies. And in fact, last year, Jeff was with us in the Omaha event. And we may find time to talk about that today. But the focus here will be on Foursquare and on Jeff's career journey, which I think is really interesting. So with that, sorry about that interruption. I will now introduce Jeff. So Jeff and I actually first met in 1999, early 2000, when Jeff was the co-founder of Site 59. Which was a really well-run, successful startup that survived the dot-com bust and 9/11 in the travel world, which maybe was even worse, and was then bought by Travelocity. And I'll say more about that in a moment. So Jeff started academically, did well. He actually got a Marshall Scholarship, went to Oxford, became a consultant, spent some time in Latin America, in Venezuela, which is in the news obviously these days. Became a White House Fellow, which is a really prestigious and cool program, along with Michelle Peluso, who then the two of them co-founded Site 59, which was focused on last-minute travel. So the idea, and they were actually one of the first to do travel packaging online, which obviously has now become the engine of the travel industry. But you could go and buy a package for last-minute travel. You couldn't buy a flight or reserve a hotel. You got all of that together, and it protected those brands and it allowed them to offer discounted prices in a way that was opaque. And so, it was a really great program, and we worked with them on the customer experience, and it was a lot of fun. Jeff then joined the councils when we were very young as a new organization. When he was then CMO at Travelocity. Travelocity bought Site 59, and then at least the way I like to describe it is a few months later, little Site 59, and it was a reverse merger essentially. The management team of Site 59 took over Travelocity, and Jeff was CMO there for 7 years. In fact, invented or created the GNOME campaign that Travelocity is so well known for. And then Jeff left and actually became the CEO at Skyfire, which was an early mobile web browser. So really, was very early in the mobile game. That was then, so he led that, grew that company successfully, took over for the founder, and then sold it to Opera, and was there for another year or two. Then became an EIR at Matrix, Entrepreneur in Residence, and then in 2015 joined Foursquare as the COO. To only a year later then become the CEO in a major transition, and we'll talk about that more. But Jeff, I thought, first of all, thanks for coming today. I know there's a lot going on at Foursquare and a lot of good things, so really appreciate having you here, and it's good to see you.
Thanks, Bill.
Would you say a few words before we get into your kind of career arc and some of the things, the way the pivot happened at Foursquare? I think it might be helpful for people to understand what is Foursquare today. And can you kind of take us through a few slides, I think helping to explain what the business is today that you guys have?
Yeah, so let me take 5 minutes. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We'll, I think, talk about a lot of things, evolving companies, career choices, human choices, ethics in tech over the next remainder of the hour. But I thought it would be useful to take 5 minutes and maybe situate the project I've been working on for the last 5 years, which is sort of reimagining Foursquare, which started out, and you may know, as a consumer check-in app from 10 years ago this week, actually, at South by.
Wow.
Anniversary celebration tomorrow night. But
Mazel tov.
and sort of now reimagine the company over the last 4.5 years that I've been here, really as a B2B company and as a platform to understand how people move through the real world. So I will maybe give 5 minutes on what that looks like. And I thought it might be interesting in and of itself for your companies to think about how location and mobile change your businesses, but also just as a case study in taking some assets and reimagining how they could be relevant in a changing world. So we now think of the company as a platform for understanding how people move through the world. And by independent platform, we offer our customers, which include 150,000 registered developers that want an alternative to depending on Google Maps or Facebook geo functionality to build their own products. And also 50 of the 100 largest advertisers in the United States who want to understand how people move through the real world. And so it's really a platform in the sense that the more people who join, the better our data sets get, the more our accuracy improves, and also it's a platform because we help other businesses sort of achieve their dreams and imagine things and make them real. So I'll give you some examples. If you type a place into Uber, like the Collaborative Gain headquarters or the Regency Cinema Tribeca, that is our database that looks that up. If you tag a tweet on Twitter, that's our API that powers that. If you get suggested a geofilter in Snapchat because you're at a cafe and you get the Coupa Cafe geofilter in Palo Alto, that's thanks to our data and technology. We help power a lot of the geo functionality on Samsung phones, AR experiences, and some of the AI contextual awareness of Bixby, their AI assistant, and thousands of other companies that depend on us. So, you know, I like to say that we touch over 1 billion people a month in the products that we power, but we're kind of an Intel Inside these days. So you might not realize that we're actually everywhere. And sort of we're very much powering customers around the world, from Tencent to Apple to Microsoft and others, that as an alternative dependence on Google. And I'll just do 1 minute. I could do much more on this, but people don't really understand that mobile location is kind of an unsolved problem. And part of it is that phones in urban areas and multi-story buildings and malls really aren't that, GPS isn't that good. It's distorted. And so there's a difference between where you really are, let's say at the vegan restaurant, and where your phone might put its little blue dot. Yeah.
You know, somehow we're not seeing slides. Are you seeing the slides on your end? We see your PowerPoint, but we don't see the slides.
Interesting.
Now, now whatever you did, we see the slide.
Okay. All right. So this was the platform, and so now now you see a slide.
Yeah.
Unmuted.
Okay.
Yes, hit play, Jeff, because yeah, try it again.
Yeah. I think that'll work. Let's see. Thanks for, while we're pausing, everyone, just FYI, please post questions on the GoToWebinar control panel while Jeff is talking, and we're going to have a Q&A.
So you're not seeing it advance though right now?
No, we're not. So there's something, sorry, we didn't figure that out earlier. It was working before.
It was, okay.
So get out of the way. Yeah, and
yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
So I'll just talk to this briefly. But so the basic idea is that where your phone thinks you are and where you really are can be very different. And you're really at the vegan restaurant, but because of signal distortion, the phone thinks it's at the blue dot where the steakhouse is, and those are very different. And this repeats on different floors of different buildings or stores and malls. And so we built a very unique phone's eye view technology, from starting originally with the 13 billion times that consumers checked in and collected the Wi-Fi triangulation and the Bluetooth beacons and time of day and GPS signal and distortion inside 100 million businesses around the world. And now every time you tag a tweet or buy a song through our partner apps on TouchTunes is the example I was thinking of, or redeem a coupon on SnipSnap or lots of other things, you are training our machine learning to recognize, hey, I know this set of Wi-Fi connection points and this time of day and this GPS distortion. That's the Starbucks on the mall, the third floor of the Mall of America. So we've kind of built these fingerprints, sensor fingerprints, the way the phones see the world, which is actually much more accurate for understanding the human view of the world than GPS.
Yeah.
GPS is a piece of it. And so it enables us to do really cool things. It enables us to understand when phones move in and out of 100 million places who have opted in. And so across our developer network, and consumers are in control. We'll come back to that. So this is a very unique thing. The state of the art before Foursquare was that people would plot an address, draw a circle or a box around it, and just assume that you were at the bank because you were within 50 yards of the bank. But not even really sure if you stopped at the bank or were walking or driving by. We're really understanding when the phone stops and goes to the second floor and spends 5 minutes or just drives by. But because we also have this crowdsourced approach as an alternative to Google, we kind of understand something about every place. So we know which places are vegan, which places are known for craft cocktails, which gyms are trendy versus popular, which are the college dive bars, and just a lot of what we call kind of metadata or taste data about all 100 million places we track for our clients, whether it's Apple or Uber or Microsoft or others that are customers of our maps. Now it's companies like Tinder and TripAdvisor and AccuWeather and others that rely on our technology to sort of detect their app users and where they're going. So, we then are able to come up with ways to make money. If you understand where all the phones in the world are going, or a good portion of them, and what they're doing when you get there, you should be able to find some business models, given that 90% of the economy is still in the real world, and all of Amazon in the United States today is 4% of consumer spending. People forget that, especially when you factor in things like autos and grocery, not even counting, real estate and things like that. So the world is still real, but digital media is greater than TV this year in spend and print. So, how do you connect the digital world and the physical world when there are no cookies in the real world? And that is a problem that our platform solves. And so with that, we can understand consumers through analytics, engage them as they enter places. We can group and segment customers based on places they go in the real world, whether it's fast food junkies or car shoppers or yoga and health food devotees, or any other way you want to segment behavior. And then CRM kind of engage your customer based on the places they go, and then measure whether your messages are bringing them into your storefronts. And so that's kind of the ways we work with folks, and we work with all kinds of Fortune 1000 companies. Just a couple quick examples. Miller Coors uses all of our data to not just target ads, but also to arm their field marketing and field sales representatives every time they walk into a bar or restaurant to know the foot traffic patterns and the demographics of that bar, and tune which products they should push at different bars or restaurants. LL Bean wanted to expand definition of outdoor enthusiasts to acquire new customers and measure whether they're coming to LL Bean stores. We work with all kinds of apps. This is one of my favorites, is that we worked with Tinder on their Tinder Places project, which we power, to sort of move Tinder from, hey, these are people you might want to meet who are just within 2 miles, to, hey, you should meet Susie, you're John, you both go to the same cold brew coffee spot in Brooklyn all the time, you both like the same dog park in Brooklyn, you have something in common, you should meet. And this was very successful in the pilot. It's rolled out in a bunch of cities, and it's coming into the mainstream Tinder experience now. We work, Subway, has 30,000 locations in North America. They had trouble understanding which of their ads was working, which different messages to different segments, and proving to their franchise owners that they were helping. So we help them and Outback Steakhouses and HCA hospitals and dozens of other companies understand whether their ads are working to bring people into their storefronts. So that is kind of the 5-minute tour of Foursquare. But we started out with great consumer experiences. Now we power those for thousands of other developers on their mobile. But we've always been committed, because we started as a consumer company, to put consumers first and have consumers be transparently in control. And we're also really committed to this independent innovation community. We don't believe the next decade should be only for Amazon, Facebook, and Google to innovate. That's why we have customers, like Snap and Uber and Tinder and Samsung and Twitter. Facebook is a customer of ours as well. But we help leading retailers and dining brands and the like kind of adjust to this new mobile world and take advantage of it. So that is a quick tour of how we've reinvented Foursquare, and we've grown the business tremendously over the last 4 years.
That's great, Jeff. Thank you for that. And I'm guessing that was helpful for a lot of people who are on the phone or listening later to understand what you guys are doing now. And what I really want to dive into with you is how did you go from A to B, right? How did you go from the Foursquare that we all know of checking into coffee shops to a company that's 99% B2B revenue with, as you said, 150,000 developers and so on. And so you joined in 2015 as COO, and then a year later became CEO. Can you walk us through that process, like how you handled that? Did you, when you joined, was that how did, and when you became CEO, it was because you had correctly identified that the company should pivot. And pivot's a popular word, but not a lot of companies do it successfully the way you guys have. So what can you tell us about that, the first year anyway, 2015 to 2016, and what happened?
Sure. I came into the company and I was introduced by Ben Horowitz, who was a large investor from Andreessen Horowitz. And I just loved what Dennis Crowley, the founder, who was then CEO, what he wanted to do in his vision, and signed up as COO. I'd never been a COO. I'd been a CMO. I'd been a CEO. I thought I'd give it a try and help him sort of scale and make his vision of kind of what he called contextual computing and the world changing as you move through it, and AI and apps understanding and changing based on where you were standing and the places you like to go. And I just, but it was all initially really focused on the Foursquare and Swarm consumer apps. And I remember saying, wait, we can understand that phones go in and out of 105 million places, and we're just guiding people to a better burrito. I love that, but we could disrupt all kinds of industries that need something like this, that are in the real world economy. And so I kind of had a very ambiguous portfolio as COO. I had strategy, but I didn't have engineering or sales or product under my mandate. But I built kind of a small team to go after the B2B business. And we started charging our 70,000 developers. Up till then, it was free as the first step. And customers like Yahoo and Twitter and developers like Path and others started paying. And it was very controversial because people inside the company were wondering why we were charging our developers, even though we were burning gabs of money, Phil. I mean, had no revenue. And I remember people saying, well, why would you charge people? They might leave us. Well, what do you have to lose? They're not paying us anything. And we have enormous data center bills, by the way, hosting these billions of queries from our free developers. So we started a premium, freemium model, and that just took off. And people we called, 100%, they said, well, we were wondering when you'd get around to charging us. Of course, we'll pay. We love the service. It quickly, just that piece became more than half the company's revenue in the first year. And then we rolled out a bunch of kind of audience segmentation products that we could extend off our walled garden and into the full programmatic world. And so by the end of the first year, that those B2B businesses were growing well over 100%, and we're 3/4 of the revenue of the company, and the consumer business was kind of stagnant. And that's when Dennis came to me and said, actually, this is becoming an enterprise software company, and I don't know how to run that. So why don't I be chairman? But that first year was tough. There was a 225 person company, and my sort of B2B group was maybe 20, 30 people, and the rest of the org just it was like civil war. They had no interest in transformation. And so it went to the board level, and I could talk more about that. But it was really a tough year because we're trying to figure out what's the future of a company.
Yeah.
But I think over time, people realized that the answer was, if we can do all this with less than 10% of the resources of the company, imagine what we could do if we actually focused on it. It just became clear what the answer was after.
So when tell me how much we can talk about today, Jeff. But when Dennis came to you, and asked you to become CEO, I was very impressed with what you did next, and I thought it was a really important set of lessons there. In other words, you didn't say yes right away. You decided to pause and think about what you would need to be able to answer his question, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that moment and what you did?
Yeah, that's right. And it was several months, actually. Yeah, Dennis asked me to step into the CEO chair, and I said, I have to think about it. And I came back to the board and Dennis with a list of, I think it was about 5 things that I thought I needed as a precondition to accept the job and to be set up for success. And one of them was a very clear definition of what our roles as chairman and CEO would mean. And one of them was a recap of the company and a new financing round, which we can talk about, but done in a way that would protect employees, but clean up, kind of the long cap table of the company and give us the capital to pursue this kind of enterprise SaaS vision in location. I didn't think it was a pivot, although I know what people mean by pivot. I thought it was an evolution because we're still a location company. We're not like Slack that went from building a game to building a workplace messaging.
Fair enough. Yeah.
But it's definitely an evolution. And there were a couple other things I needed, like the full hire fire authority, and alignment between the board and Dennis and I about how the resources were going to be allocated, what the strategic vision was. So we went through all that, and it took several months, partly because we were raising this recap round. And I didn't step into the CEO chair until the day we announced the round, although I was, starting to do the job in effect. One of the things that I know, one of your topics is asking for help, so I may come back to this. But my good friend Michelle Peluso, who I co-founded Safety9 with, we met at the White House, was someone I went to for help on this period, because she had done a recap at Guilt Group, where she was CEO, and when they needed sort of to do that, and I had a sense of I wanted to protect the employees because it wasn't their fault that we were, now finding our rhythm, 6 years into the company, and yet she gave me the courage and the things to ask for that it was doable. And so I relied a lot on her on that. And so when we finally had this big reveal meeting where we talked about, raising 50 share, which the company, other than a few of us, that wasn't known. We spent an hour with all, 250 employees talking about how we had done it in a way that was incredibly attractive to employees. And at the end of the hour, I remember some engineer in the back sort of raising his hand and saying, like, this is incredible. Like, how did you get the investors to agree to all this? And it doesn't make, like, why did they agree to do this for the employees? And I just remember saying, honestly, it's because the people in this room and on the phone, we can't build a company without you. I mean, the talent is everything, and the community here is special. So I could say that to the investors, unless we make this attractive for the employees, it's not going to work. And that was both true and also a powerful moment, because they could hear it was authentic. And so that was a dramatic moment, but it definitely would not have happened unless I had that leverage to say, I'm not taking this job unless I have the conditions to win.
Yeah, and just to be clear, so everyone understands, so this new funding round was a so-called down round, right, where the company's valuation was lower. Now, typically in down rounds, what happens is employee options become worthless, or at least worth a lot less. And so what Jeff did is, he said, "Way, we're tough negotiators," that look, thank you for the offer to become CEO. I'm obviously very excited about the potential here, but there's some things I need, including we can't, this funding round can't be a haircut for the employee options, right? Which, by the way, if you say that, that means someone else is taking a haircut, right? Which meant the investors were actually going to have to accept some change there to the negative. But, and as you said, Jeff, that was like the moment of leverage that you had, right? Without saying yes right away. And this is, whether you're a CEO or you're taking a new job as a VP or looking at a promotion, I think one of the great lessons from this story is, hey, do you have what you need to take that job, right? And it's in that moment of being offered the job leverage to set those conditions up, right? How hard was that for you? You said the courage that Michelle gave you, like, was that hard to go to the board and the investors and say, guys, we have to protect the employees? Or, did they sort of quickly understand that?
It wasn't hard for me to push for it. I mean, it felt like the right thing to do very clearly, but it was hard to know what the boundaries of the feasible were in that negotiation. Against Ben Horowitz and Albert Wenger, Union Square Ventures, and
Albert Wenger, yeah.
One folks. So it was helpful to know that it was doable. And what Michelle and Kevin Ryan had worked out at Guild gave me some ideas and because when you're negotiating for something, it's nice to know, like, hey, this isn't the first time this has been done.
Right.
Doable legally. And so yes, we fully protected the employees through this down round, because Foursquare had this history where it had been valued as if it would be the next Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. It was Instagram before Instagram, as a consumer, early stage, fast growing, app. And it was, the valuation got way ahead of any real metrics or revenue. And so when we valued the company, I looked at public enterprise SaaS and MarTech companies, and looked at the public trading on their revenue multiples. Let's value the company like a public company as a multiple of revenue. And then I'm confident we're going to grow, as we did, 50% the subsequent 3 years. And so the valuation will just rise as the revenue rises. And so I could tell employees, the new investors were betting that they were going to triple their money or better, and the employees should too. And the employees were right there with the investors. And yes, it did mean the early investors taking, I won't get into the details, but taking some haircuts to do that.
Yeah. Now, so you just segued to what I want to go to next, which is the next 3 years you had significant growth, and then you did a major funding round last year that was an up round, right? So first of all, did most of the employees stay, after this was announced? And why has this worked so well in the last couple of years? What have you guys done?
Yeah, I mean, our retention, and we've been kind of lucky in that we were able to recruit incredible talent early on, and then we've still been able to get really good engineering talent and sales talent. as kind of one of the made in New York pioneer marquee companies, even though the company went through roller coaster. But I think, I mean, our retention is right around the norms, you know. So over people average 4 years at the company. We're proud that they go on to great jobs. Often, like some starts as a junior engineer and gets several promotions over 4 or 5 years and ends up being hired as the head of engineering for another startup in New York often. And that's okay. That's like our investment in them, and we're proud of the alums. So, you know, there has been a lot of turnover then over 4 years with a 4-year average stay at the company. And so what happened often is that the people who would come to me and say, look, what you've done with the company is the right thing for the company, and the company's thriving now. But I joined it when it was a consumer business and going to be a consumer rocket ship, and it obviously isn't a consumer business anymore, and I want to go work for a consumer company. But you're doing the right thing, and I'm exercising my options, and I believe in the company, but it's just not a fit for me anymore, and I respected that. And so some of that turnover happens when you're evolving a company. But other people who were early on just got religion about, you know, we love the technology we built and kind of this vision of the future where you walk into a place and your phone kind of understands the world. And so, you know, we talk all the time about walking down a street in Barcelona and getting your phone sort of buzzing, and it says, hey, your friend Phil loves the tapas place around the corner. It's the best tapas in Barcelona. Go in and order the crab legs. And, you know, like that kind of awareness as you walk by, we did on our own apps and we loved it, and it was a model for us. But now we do that for TripAdvisor. Like they wanted to make the world social for a much bigger scale community. And so now, you know, we were able to say, hey, look, we're still look like what relevance looks like in a mobile world. And we're doing it at a much bigger scale than if it was just our own branded apps now. And so we could find a pride in that, helping Tinder, you know, pair people better and make travel social and help people save money through a coupon at the right moment when you enter the store and things like that. So that was a new pride, and a lot of the early folks are still with the company. But there was kind of this decision cultural point of were you on board with the new platform?
Yeah. Now, obviously, the dialogue about privacy has changed since this started, since, you know, you began this transition in 2005, 2016. I'm interested in getting into that. I'm also interested in getting into more of the leadership questions. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to call on a couple of our participants about your business and how it works. And so do you, Rick Robinson, I'm going to call on you in a moment. Jeff, I think you and Rick were on a council together. Do you remember Rick? Maybe you didn't overlap. He was a founding member. He might have actually left just before you came back on, but now today he's running, he's done a whole bunch of things in the startup world, and he took a job as running the innovation lab at ARP, interestingly. So Rick, I'm going to unmute you. Rick, are you there? Rick? Oh, let's see. He might have posted something. He might have said, oh, okay. He just said, yep. Okay. Rick, you can't, it sounds like you can't hear me. I unmuted you. So I'll tell you what, I'll come back to you in a moment. I'm going to mute you again. Jim Carrington, can I call on you? Let me see. I'll unmute you and see if I can do that. Jim, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yep. Great. So, Jim, this is Jeff. Jim Carrington runs e-commerce for Uline. I don't know if you know that company.
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely fantastic company. Really fanatic customer experience, and has grown, you know, significantly. Jim, what kinds of questions? What are you interested in talking with Jeff about?
Well, I think you were about to go into it, Phil. I'm interested in the whole, you know, how the whole sort of hyper focus on breaches and data privacy and all that stuff is affecting how you're going about, you know, kind of shaping your future.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Did you hear that, John?
Do you want me to speak to that now, Phil?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I actually did a whole 30-minute podcast on this with the editor of The Verge about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So if you really want to dig into this topic, the Vergecast podcast from a couple weeks ago is entirely devoted to this, and I'm pretty proud of the conversation.
Okay, thanks.
So, one of the things and I talk a lot about, and
Oh, Jeff, we just lost your audio. I don't know if you can hear me. Jim, can you hear Jeff?
I cannot.
Yeah. I wish I were a lip reader. Let me see. I'm going to mute you for a second. What do I do here? Jeff. Actually, I'm going to mute him first. I'm going to mute Jeff, and then I'm going to unmute him. Jeff, we lost your audio.
oh no, okay, so you lost that whole thing?
Yes, the entire thing, yes. So
Oh no.
as soon as you asked Jim, oh, you want me to go into this? And I said, yes, after you said the Verge podcast. That was the last thing we heard.
Oh, okay. Well, I encourage you to listen to the Vergecast podcast, but on this topic from a couple weeks ago on Foursquare. But I was saying that, Foursquare is a little unique in that we talk a lot about how to build an ethical tech company at this time when there's so much scrutiny on Facebook and Google and big tech. What is the impact on our society across a whole bunch of things, from fake news to our kids being pulled into hoaxes and sort of absorbed into feeds instead of human contact, and thousands of other really interesting topics. And we kind of are a thoughtful company about wanting to be an ethical tech company. And how do you do that? And so, as we were born in this very sensitive area a decade ago of location sharing to your friends. And so we've had kind of a decade to think about our belief in privacy and consumer control. And we've kind of been known for setting a really high bar on transparency and trust. And so, but the standards are evolving, and the bar now is higher than it's ever been for what opt-in looks like and what consumer control looks like. So I was pretty vocal on that Vergecast podcast of saying that I think the U.S. needs a privacy regulatory law akin to the GDPR law in Europe that we supported pretty vocally. But the law should be a smart law, because if you write the law poorly, you actually will just reinforce Facebook and Google's dominance and eliminate sort of competition. And that is often what happens in poorly written, well-intended legislation, and it could very much happen in the United States, because Facebook and Google have armies of lawyers and lobbyists. So the principles that we always come back to is there should be value for the consumer in sharing something like location data, and so everything we do is focused on our first party network of apps that where you're asked, hey, do you want contextual weather alerts from AccuWeather that are different when you're in a baseball stadium than when you're in your office? You choose to opt in, and on the disclosure screen is we'll send you pollen alerts and pollution alerts and storm alerts, and we're also using this information to tailor ads and offers to you across the web. And generally about half of consumers opt in because they want the service, and the other half don't opt in, and then they're not participating in it. But they don't get these smart alerts. And so, it's very much consumer control. So is there a consumer value proposition? Is there a very transparent opt-in, not page 200 of the privacy policy? but you know what you're getting and the uses of that data, and you trust this company. And then third, and are you continually in control? So like, for instance, we support, as a matter of principle, the European law of right to be forgotten, but we support that portability and right to be forgotten in the United States and around the world, even though it's not the law, because we just think it's the right thing to do. And then lastly, we are trying to advocate for kind of a code of conduct, or what we call a Hippocratic oath for data scientists, which is, this is a trust, data is a privilege. And, so we actually believe that it's like a fiduciary duty. Would this person who entrusted me with this data, would they view this as harming them in any way? And I've seen examples of that. So we have an ethics committee and ethics training, and we think a lot about it. We don't, we only use the data in ways that the consumer would view in their interest. And so, but we're proudly able to help personalize ads, and I'm proud of that. I have an electric car, and I'm interested in I shop at organic groceries. I'm not interested in your high fructose corn syrup and your big gas guzzling truck. And someone else is very different. I don't waste my time with irrelevant ads. And we believe that the ad ecosystem adds value, whether it's democratizing access to music through Spotify and Pandora, or TV historically, or Google Maps and Gmail, and all these ad-supported services that democratize really valuable things. And so, we support that kind of thing, but in a privacy thoughtful way. So those are the three principles: the value for the consumer understanding and opt-in and ongoing control, and then thirdly, that kind of fiduciary trust.
Yeah.
The Hippocratic oath. And so we talk a lot about that in the podcast, and we'll be advocating for that. And not everyone, I think, adheres to that, but I do think it's a vision of the future. And I talk a lot about self-driving cars as a model here, because this is an area which is going to save probably 1 million lives a year, because humans are really bad at driving, and they drive drunk, and they kill each other, and they maim each other at enormous numbers. But you have the first death from self-driving cars, and rightly we're anxious, and we're slowing down and trying to establish the norms for this new world. But you would want to reform and set it up right. You don't want to throw out the possibility of saving millions of lives. And I think location is kind of like that. We have to get it right, so that we're building a future that we're proud of.
Yeah. I thought you were also going to say, in terms of self-driving cars, they're also like huge data machines, right? So there's the data side to the self-driving car in terms of the ethics of how those companies are going to manage that information. I wonder if you have a point of view on Zuckerberg's recent announcement about the new direction for Facebook, and that they're going to, it's no longer, it's mostly going to be private and only your friends, and they're changing their model to services revenue and away from advertising, supposedly anyway, if I understand it correctly.
Yeah. Well, I think it's too early to opine on how real that is. I think the model there is probably a lot of the Chinese companies like WeChat, where they're, if you look at their revenue models, they're kind of 40% advertising, 20% subscriptions, and 20% commerce, and things like that. And so I think they're very interested in that. But look, we could spend an hour on privacy. What people forget is part of the Zuckerberg encrypted end-to-end concept is to also keep governments from getting to the data.
Yes.
And there's been a lot of talk right now. We focus on Facebook and our worries about Facebook, but there's less attention to the fact that it turned out that the US NSA data collection process captured all kinds of data that it turned out the lawyers told them they had to purge years later, that they weren't supposed to collect. And that's not getting front page news. And in fact, governments are probably the most concerning practitioners of non-opt-in collection. The Chinese and UK surveillance state with cameras and AI everywhere is kind of an example there. But it's funny, I try to push people to realize that we get very uncomfortable with new things, but we're very comfortable with things that are much more intrusive on our privacy and have been going around for decades. Anyone who gets riled about online privacy should probably be asked, hey, do you have a CVS or Walgreens card or a grocery loyalty card? Because your name and address and every single thing you buy is sold to Oracle and other companies that resell it in a millisecond of leaving the store, and with your name and address. And actually that's far more personally identifiable than anything that most mobile ad stuff does. And so, but we don't talk about that. You know? And I don't remember opting into that data being sold, even though I might get some discounts. So it's a complex area, and it deserves some thoughtful debate.
Yeah, great. Hey, I'm going to call on another person, Peter Nush. Peter, are you there?
I'm here.
Great. Peter runs product at Comcast. He actually built the Xfinity platform, Jeff, if you're familiar with that. Peter, what are you interested in here? Would you like to talk some more about leadership and Jeff's career, or would you like to talk more about the technology or the data work they're doing?
Actually, interestingly enough, the leadership part is fascinating to me. One of the things that I'm really curious about is when you started evolving or pivoting or whatever the favorite turn of phrase would be from the original consumer product to this new direction you're headed, how did you present and pitch to the organization writ large that this was the evolution of the journey to minimize folks who felt perhaps left behind or uninterested in making that journey with you? How did you make that positive and successful for them?
Well, we really tried to communicate a lot. I'm not sure we always got it perfect. And as I said, some people just chose to self-select out as we evolved. But we did it very gradually. And one of the things we said to the consumer teams was, look, that we want to keep these apps alive for our tens of millions of users for decades to come and have the resources to invest in them. And it's just not a sustainable business. And so, initially, even more than maybe we should have, some of the people like Dennis sold the B2B business as a way to make revenue to then fund the consumer as the real point of the company. And so it was kind of a necessary evil. But I always sold it as, actually, this is just the things that we are building in our vision of the future getting far more pervasive. And you don't affect the future unless you reach a huge part of the people and make their experiences better. And so, it was more about taking pride in making Twitter geo-aware or Tinder geo-aware or powering Uber and Snapchat. And we actually are the WeChat's geo layer outside of China and things like that. And so, just being part of Apple Maps and all of that was really something to take pride in a way that a lot of B2B companies can't point to how friends at a cocktail party, how the product affects them. So I tried to make it about sort of living up to this vision of making cities easier to use and building this independent platform as a point of pride. And over time, that's what I've emphasized. And I think with any change, like I've been through transforming Travelocity from almost all airline tickets to mostly hotels and packages, and we went from 3 billion to 11 billion while I was CMO. Transforming Ayugo and Skyfire, and those were all transformations. Skyfire we transformed from a consumer app browser trying to compete with Safari and Chrome to actually selling telco level software for network optimization for mobile video to Verizon and other telcos. And in each of these evolutions, there's kind of this early adopter diffusion of innovation curve where you find the people who get it and you go out and you get early wins. Other people start to join in and get excited. Need that. In or out, and they get excited when they see success. Ultimately, succeeding is its own.
Sure.
Cool. Yeah.
Can I do a quick follow-up?
Sure, Peter.
When you say, obviously, I think just pulling people into a room and announcing it in a 1-hour session isn't enough. But when you say over time, can you maybe quantify how much time? Was it months? Was it years? How long did you start shifting this attitude for what would become the current vision of the company?
Well, it's definitely years. I mean, like I would say probably every quarter, about 2 years, we probably shifted maybe 10% of resources from we started probably 80-90% consumer resources, and we ended up probably 90% on the B2B business, and we probably moved it 10 points a quarter. But so it was a very gradual thing, maybe too gradual, but it was working, and we were able to say we're not shutting down the consumer business. In fact, you got to remember that the consumer tens of millions, like 1 billion check-ins a year, is one of the things that sets our accuracy apart, because we have 13 billion times human beings have told us the right answer in a multi-sensor way, and that's a machine learning gold training set. And so we were building, I mean, the revenue is 99% B2B, but we were able to honor the consumer apps and make them part of it, but we didn't have to grow them to create value. We just had to make sure they kept thriving.
Very helpful.
People who volunteer today to edit our 100 million place database in this kind of Wikipedia place, and that's the only reason we can win the Uber contract over Google, which spends probably $20 billion a year mapping the world, is this crowdsourced army that we have.
Yeah, that's great. Peter?
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Let's see, Rick, I'm going to try calling on you one more time, and anyone else, by the way, have questions. Let me just see. Let's see if it'll work, Rick. I'll unmute you. Oh, hang on, sorry, did not do it the right person. And by the way, Richard Blackstone, you were with us last year in Omaha. If you had a question or wanted to bring anything up, just note that, and I'll unmute you. Rick, I just unmuted you. Can we hear you?
Testing.
Yeah. There we go. Do it like, Buffett does, testing 1 million, 2 million, 3 million. Anyway,
well, hello. I'm glad you can hear me. And hey, Pete Nuts, good to hear your voice.
He's nodding his head. You can't hear him.
Funny story without so much funny to it. A long time ago, I was on the board of a company called Vindigo. When I would go to the board meetings, I would see Dennis Crowley there in the office because he worked for Vindigo. Long time ago. Thanks for calling on me, Phil. And good to chat. I've got a lot of questions, but I'll just a couple of things. And I'm not as familiar as I used to be. I used to be very deep into location-based services, but on the technical side, are you guys look into other ways of tracking location other than using the cellular network and GPS because of, in anticipation of carriers maybe kind of limiting that access? So through accelerometers and other things in the phones, being able to track people's location without relying on networks. Is that something that's ever come across your desk, so to speak?
Sure.
Or are you not worried?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So we can talk about this at length, but the short answer is we don't use carrier data at all. And so, there was recently a motherboard story about telcos doing some pretty dodgy things where bail bondsmen could look up a phone number. The reality is we've never used telco data and the telco data is actually really junky data. It comes from cell tower triangulation. They don't have access to GPS location. And we've never used it. We actually think that telcos as regulated entities don't have any real opt-in mechanism. Just because your phone connects doesn't mean you opted in to having your location used. It's like water. It's healthcare. It's like a basic necessity. And so we don't think the telcos should be using that data, but we also just know that data it's sort of like 100-meter diameter to 1,000-meter diameter accuracy. So it tells you tell you that you're in the Sephora instead of the Equinox next door. So we never used it, and we think they should be put out of business for that dodgy stuff. Right. So not all locations.
They don't.
We used. Sorry.
I'm sorry. So there's no danger in your case of carriers via the OEMs limiting access to the GPS for some of these services.
Yeah, the carriers wouldn't. I mean, the Apple and Google could conceively block the operating system stuff, but there are thousands of apps that, including Google Maps and Waze and other that rely on it. And if they were giving access to Google Maps or Apple Maps and not by consumer choice to rival mapping or geo services, that would be an antitrust concern for them.
Yeah.
So I think we obviously regulation could be a problem, but we feel like we're pretty gold standard on this. And we're hoping actually hope for regulation because we try to set a high bar, and we think some of the dodgy behavior going out of the market would be good for good players like us. So that could be a long conversation, but we do look at accelerometer, Wi-Fi triangulation, and the like. In fact, we did a test for Apple, and we proved that we were, I think, 80 or 90% as accurate as GPS just by using our proprietary map of the world's Wi-Fi locations on the buildings and knowing where you were just on the Wi-Fi permutations alone. So we have lots of tools.
Yeah. You may have touched on this, and I apologize. I got distracted by somebody in my office. But what are you guys doing with regard to prediction based on your data, being able to predict where people are going and doing and so on?
So that also could be an hour talk. And we sort of famously have made some predictions which are actually seeing the past faster than anyone else, not really predictions. So I went on CNBC pretty famously a couple years ago and predicted that with the E. coli scare that Chipotle sales would be down 30% year over year, and then a week later they printed their earnings and they were down 29.9%. And we didn't predict that, we were seeing it. Foot traffic.
Post-dicted it. That was a post-diction.
Post-diction, right? But the world didn't know that we
faster than anyone else. Yeah.
Right. We could see the present faster than anyone else, and so that's a form of prediction. But we also we for our attribution product that helps big advertisers, we predict the likelihood that any person is going to go to, say, a Subway or a McDonald's or a Kohl's department store based on 500 machine learned factors, including how far away they work or live, and whether they've been to Kohl's before, and their demographics, and all of these other things. So we predict the propensity to visit a Subway sandwich location, and then when someone sees an ad, we observe whether they're higher than predicted to go, and that's how we judge ad effectiveness.
Yeah, great. I just muted Rick because there's a little muting there. And by the way, we're at the end of our time. You know, Jeff, I really appreciate you coming and speaking with us and talking to us both about your evolution and also the evolution of Foursquare. I just want to congratulate you. Let's end with so your funding round last year, the up round. Tell us, what was that again? How much did you guys raise? And was that public? I think it was.
Yeah,
public.
I don't think we published valuation, but yes, we did announce that we grew after I came in. As CEO, we grew 50% revenue 3 years in a row, and we raised an up round last year, we're still a startup and anything could happen, but I feel really optimistic on the 10th anniversary of the company that will actually be relevant for the next decade, and part of things like AR and AI and self-driving cars and the like, and real estate optimization and 1,000 other fun stuff that we get to do because we're around and having an impact. So that I'm proud of.
Yeah. Well, congratulations, and and thank you for taking the high ground on the privacy and the ethics around that. I really like the way you guys are thinking about that. And I agree. I think we do need a GDPR equivalent here in the United States. And frankly, if we don't play a proactive role, I think it's going to happen at some point. The question is, like you said, whether it's well-written legislation or it's reactive legislation. So congratulations, good luck on the next several years, and thank you. Thank you to everybody with us live, and if you've listened to this by recording, again, look forward to seeing you in April in the San Francisco Council meetings. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, everyone. All right.
Thanks, Will.
We will go ahead and close.